The story of hydroxychloroquine is believed to start back in 1631 with a lady called Countess Cinchona, who was the wife of the Viceroy of Peru. When she developed a malaria infection, she decided to forgo the accepted medical treatment at the time of bloodletting and instead sought treatment from an Incan herbalist. Bloodletting had an understandably low success rate, and as a result, mortality rates for malaria infections were very high. But the herbalist made a treatment for her by grinding the bark of a local tree to a powder, and her recovery was dramatic. The Viceroy was so impressed by this, when he returned to Spain, he brought with him vast quantities of the powdered bark to be used around the world for managing malaria, marking one of the most significant steps in our history of managing infectious diseases. As is common with these stories, the name of the Incan herbalist has sadly been lost to history, but the bark used to make this treatment became known as cinchona bark, apparently in honour of the Countess's ability to dismiss medical advice. It took 2 further centuries for us to figure out that the active compound of the cinchona bark was quinine, and a further century for us to successfully dampen down the toxicity of quinine through hydroxylation to produce hydroxychloroquine. But since then, this chemical has remained in clinical practice unchanged to this day. Hydroxychloroquine was initially marketed as a treatment for malaria, but in only a few years, evidence gathered supporting its effectiveness in managing inflammation in a wide range of autoimmune conditions like lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. Whilst the toxicity of hydroxychloroquine is significantly lower than quinine, as the dose was pushed upwards, it was found to affect several systems, including the muscles, heart, and central nervous system. But by far the most commonly affected organ was the eyes. Retinal toxicity was detected early on, and we've understood for a long time that this damage is irreversible, and the risk increases with each year a person remains on the drug. But despite this being such a long-established treatment in clinical practice, our management of retinal toxicity unfortunately needs much improvement. Our old guidance recommended regular eye checks with local optometrists using reading charts, but these are of limited value because hydroxychloroquine retinopathy affects peripheral vision first and only causes central vision loss at its most advanced stages, and there's no going back once this happens. Also, with the right equipment, the damage can be detected before any perceptible changes in vision present, but this requires very specialised, expensive equipment, so these patients have to be monitored under the dedicated hydroxychloroquine retinopathy monitoring service at the eye hospital. For the majority of patients, this begins at 5 years of treatment, so it's very important we establish how long patients have used it for in our medication reviews. This is particularly important for new patients arriving at the practice or patients arriving from overseas who may not have complete medical records. After this, they'll be monitored annually under this clinic, and any issues identified will be escalated to either their GP or rheumatologist for further action. Some patients are at higher risk of retinal toxicity, and these people will need annual monitoring from 1 year after starting treatment. And these are patients on doses over 5 mg per kilogram, patients taking tamoxifen, and patients with an eGFR of less than 60 mL per minute. The specialist teams are familiar with these risk factors, but in general practice this wouldn't be at the forefront of our minds, so it's very important we're looking out for patients who enter this high-risk category during their first 5 years of treatment. This means we'll have to keep a close watch on patients who start tamoxifen, develop a drop in body weight or a drop in renal function, and refer to the hydroxychloroquine monitoring service as appropriate. Interestingly, At the time of filming, the BNF doesn't draw attention to this interaction between tamoxifen and hydroxychloroquine, but I've written to their editorial team to recommend this during future updates, and if you want to write to them too, please feel free to use the email address in the description. So this leaves us with a few things we could decide to audit at our practices. We can run a search to find patients who are currently prescribed hydroxychloroquine to ensure they have a documented start date on their notes. We can then modify this search to help identify patients on both hydroxychloroquine and tamoxifen, or those who are currently on the CKD register. We can then export the search results to Excel to let us analyze each patient record in more detail, and if our searches work, we might want to share them with one of our colleagues to make their life easier. So this all leads nicely into the next video, which will teach you how to use EMIS to do all of these things. See you next time.